Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Prosperity Through Multifamily Real Estate Investing podcast. As always, I'm your host, Cody Laughlin, and we have a very special guest with us today, Mrs. Mandy McAllister. A little bit about Mandy. Mandy is a multifamily real estate investor, mindset ninja. Love that. We'll have to talk about that. Eternal learner, coach, and dot connector. Her passion is to help others define their path to financial freedom through syndications, coaching, and her platform, Aspiring Women Achieving More. So, Mandy, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me, Cody.
Yeah,
Excited to be
yeah. Oh, good. We're excited to have you on and really appreciate you making the time to be with us this morning. And I'm really excited to share your story with the listeners. So, tell us a little bit more about your background and kind of how you got into the real estate space.
Sure. I grew up on a farm, followed volleyball to a little school in Georgia where I was at a party and my friend was talking about how her dad bought the house she was living in and was renting out rooms to like our friends. And I thought, oh my gosh, you get to keep that money. That's the best idea I've ever heard in my entire life. So that was really at 19, 20 years old, like the very first light bulb of, real estate investing makes a lot of sense. So then I moved like the day after I finished undergrad, I moved up to Chicago, did a master's degree. After that, I worked on the floor of the Board of Trade, where I saw guys lose millions and millions of dollars in seconds. So the idea of paper assets became way less attractive and kind of redirected me back to hard assets. I grew up with farm ground and, the idea of rentals like hit my brain in college. And then, got into medical device sales. I've been doing that for about 15 years. And, I had always had, the whole analysis paralysis thing. I think so many of us end up reading so much, listening to so many podcasts, doing so much like just learning and gathering of information without like action taking alongside of that. And, I made some moves in like 2008 that kind of put me, I bought a condo thinking I would, when that value went up, I'll move out and I'll go buy another one. I'll let somebody live in that condo. But that, in terms of like actually acquiring for express purpose of rental property, I didn't start going pro, as I call it, until 2016. So my first actual purchase was a fourplex in 2016. So it's funny how quickly things can change in 5 years. So that was kind of the beginning of my addiction.
Love it. Love it. And I tell you what, 2016 was not a bad time to get started. I mean, still right there in the middle of this just great appreciation wave that we've been seeing over the past decade. So kudos. And, I agree with your point about the analysis paralysis. I think as people study and you start learning and you realize that there is a pretty steep learning curve in the commercial real estate space, and it can be overwhelming for some people and you get stuck there, and it's very easy to fall into, and you want everything to be perfect, but eventually you got to get out of your comfort zone, right? I mean, nothing's going to be perfect. You're going to make mistakes, but you got to get yourself out there and get moving. But you have mentioned that you're in medical device sales. So you currently still hold that position today, right?
I sure do. Yeah,
Awesome.
we're going to
Awesome.
cases as soon as we're done chatting here.
Awesome. Well, this is something that is near and dear to me, having still maintaining a W-2 and trying to build your business. I'm in the same position as well. John, one of my partners, is. And so I think many of our listeners are probably in the same circumstance. Obviously the goal would be to get to where we could do real estate investing full time, but it takes time and you have to involve it. I was kind of wondering if you could kind of allude to how are you managing your schedule? You're a mother, you have a job, you're building this business, and which we'll get into a little bit later. But kind of talk to me about your day, your schedule. How are you managing all the tasks of just life?
Well, this is an old one, but I mean, I'm a huge proponent of time blocking. So I'll tell you that, I read a lot. Well, and I use read in quotes because it's really audiobooks while I'm driving everywhere. But, this idea of, this book, Deep Work, really informed the way I approach a lot of things. So, in our modern world, we think multitasking is, women are better than men because women can nobody can multitask. All you're doing is switching immediately from one activity to another. And that brain switching, you lose time, you lose focus, you lose the ability to get really deep on whatever it is that you're doing. So, the real hack is, how can I give my deepest attention possible to one thing at a time? So, a couple of my hacks there. I time block. I spend like I don't know, half hour, either Monday morning or Sunday night, just kind of planning out like these are my commitments in terms of appointments, like our chat here made my little time blocking. And then I also, in terms of, how I then fill that time, my uncommitted time, I like to, batch things, this idea of batching. So like I mentioned, I drive a lot for work, and most of my incredible ideas come when I'm like driving in traffic, right? So I've started a bunch of like lists on Siri, and I'll say, she's probably gonna hear me, but I'll say, Siri, put Cody on my follow-up list. And she'll go, beep, Cody added to follow-up list, So then when I get to my 2 hours of follow-up time, instead of wondering what I need to do, I go to that list. And I can just go, all right, Cody, all right, Jennifer, all right, you know what I mean? And go straight down that list. And I feel so effective. I am so effective because everything is all in one place and I have one train of thought. So that has really helped me be significantly more effective in what it is that I'm doing. I made a little video on it and put it on my blog on my website. So if you're interested in learning more, and I actually share this little, sheet that I made with anybody who's interested. So those are a couple of my hacks about how I get stuff done.
I love that. And it can't be overemphasized enough how important that time blocking is. Cause you're right. I think, especially, I mean, just the real estate business alone, there's so many hats to wear, there's so many things to do. And you cannot become an expert in one area or the other if you're trying to pull yourself too thin, and then you take the fact that, again, you have a job, you have a family, like, you have to be efficient with your time. And I was kind of introduced to a very similar concept many years ago by Franklin Covey. And Franklin Covey talks about big rocks and little rocks. And as entrepreneurs, you spend so much of your time and energy, in many cases, focusing on things that take your time away, but really aren't growing your business, right? And so like having time blocking, focusing on the things that are going to grow your business or whatnot, that's what's important. And that's how, that's, again, it just can't be overemphasized enough importance.
So given what you just said, I think, have you heard of this book, The Road Less Stupid by Keith Cunningham? OMG, I think you'd really love it. So it's one of my so I've gone all the way down the Tony Robbins rabbit hole. And one of my major takeaways from Wealth Mastery was this Keith Cunningham stuff. Given what you said, I think you'd really love that book.
Oh, cool. I'm gonna definitely check it out. I'm gonna make sure we got that on the list for sure.
Awesome.
I love to read. The problem is like, man, I need to time block it in my schedule. Like, how can I fit more time to read in there? But I'll definitely get to it.
Consider audio, man. Like it's,
oh yeah.
Some.
My vehicle is what I call my mobile office, right? Where it's all podcasts and audiobooks and whatnot. So yeah,
my
completely agree.
Almost 5-year-old, he doesn't think my radio plays music.
Love it. Well, I love the fact that he's being involved in the business too. He's hearing it and he's learning at a young age. So that's awesome. But so you referenced Tony Robbins. Are you part of his following, or you're ingrained in some of his teachings?
Oh, I'm a huge fan. See, the thing is, what I'm a huge proponent of is doing the hard work of thinking through the hard questions that most people don't think through. And my catalyst to think those hard questions, for some people it's therapy, for some people it's just meditation. But for me, like being in these huge immersive events and, being asked these questions really helped me become a better version of myself and like get rid of a lot of the voices and self-talk that's not ideal or helpful. So yeah, I've really dived completely into that. And, to be around other people who are committed to bettering themselves, you realize you're not crazy for wanting to figure this stuff out because there's millions of others. So.
Yeah, I think if there's been any followers of our show, they know that we're very, very big on mindset and surrounding yourself with people that are like-minded, that are doing what it is that you're doing. Because as passionate as we are and as energized as we are, especially when we're learning about this, right? You get in it and you just got all this energy, and then you go to talk to your friends about it and they're like, yeah, that's stupid. That doesn't make sense. Or, that's risky. And what happens is you hear that enough, and what happens, you start questioning, and then you start kind of backtracking, and then you lose that fizzle,
Yep.
And so, again, surrounding yourself with those people is very, very important. So I really appreciate that. And so I kind of wanted to lead into, I love in your bio, we mentioned that you're a mindset ninja, which I love that term. So talk to us a little bit more about kind of your growth in the mindset from where you started as an entrepreneur, where you are now. What are some things that you're doing to constantly feed and grow your mindset?
Oh, this is my absolute favorite subject. Like Tony Robbins says, 80% of anything is where your head is at, the mindset, and 20% is the mechanics. So if you can get your head straight, I would venture to say that at least somebody listening to this knows all that there is, as much as there is to know, because you'll never know all there is to know about multifamily investing. But the headspace stuff of the analysis paralysis, the fear of, oh my gosh, what if this doesn't work out? Or what if somebody in my family judges me, or so on and so forth. Like, if you can't get that stuff straight, you're never going to make a move. You're never going to be able to move to like what it is, this life that you see for yourself at step 800, because you can't get to step 2. So I started actually a mindset series on my friend Barry Griffith's podcast, Wrestling with Real Estate. So I think we air Sunday night or Monday morning. We talk about a subject around mindset that we think is particularly applicable to real estate investing, particularly multifamily investing, because when you start adding zeros, you really got to get your head straight. So I mean, I'll say for me, like, it's your brain is an organ. Your thoughts are like chemical responses. You can, if you have the vantage point that you have an opportunity to rewire your brain, you can. It just takes some training. You can teach an old dog new tricks. So whenever you have a thought or behavior or whatever that is not serving you, if you pay it the right attention, you can change it. You just have to choose. You have to decide to change it.
Yeah. That's such a fantastic point. The mind is like a muscle, and it has to constantly be trained and whatnot. And if you're not out there, challenging yourself, constantly ingraining yourself in these concepts that we're discussing, you're not going to get very far. And so, and I love that you mentioned Barry, man. Barry's a great guy. I love Barry. And if he's listening to this episode, I need to get him on the show. We've had the opportunity to be on his show, but I need to get him on this, but great guy. And I really, I'm looking forward. You said the mindset series, and it's on, when does it air?
It's just Barry's Wrestling with Real Estate podcast, and it's every 7th episode. So I think it's either the Sunday night episode or the Monday morning episode. I get tagged on Instagram, so that's how I remember.
Perfect. I wanted to make sure that's in the show notes and make sure we reference that, because I'd love to tune into that. So, but I share my story when I tell people, and I'll be honest with people. When I first started, you heard a lot about mindset, and it's very easy to get like, okay, all right, yeah, I heard it, like move on, let's get into the nuts and bolts. And I was that guy. I was like, okay, I've heard this enough, like let's go. But now 18 months, almost 2 years into my journey, I've completely switched that mindset and philosophy, and understand and appreciate the importance of mindset. Because listen, at the end of the day, it's a hard business. You're going to get your teeth kicked in. You're going to have a lot of ups. You're going to have a lot of downs, and those downs can be hard. And sometimes you make mistakes that are very expensive. And if you don't have the right mindset to kind of battle through that, I mean, again, you're not going to get anywhere. So I really love talking about this topic, and I don't think it can be talked about enough. And I hope that by sharing at least my story in that, listen, pay attention to this, focus on this, make it a part of your business. It's important.
This is the real work, the getting your head straight, like that 80-20 thing. That is not a joke. Like no one is too good to figure themselves out. Like once you start digging in, you're going to realize stuff that you didn't know you realized or didn't know affected you. And it'll change your focus. It'll change your approach to things. It'll change whatever level of fear you bring to stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So talk to us, Mandy, what are some things that you like to do to constantly feed your mindset?
Well, I have goals that I review. One of my goals is to review my goals 50 times a year. And I really stay on top of them. It's almost like Grant Cardone writes his every day. I just make sure that I have them in front of me. So I know, like I talked about, that step 800, so that I know where I'm going, so that each step every day gets me in the direction I want to go. I do a ton of audiobooks. I do actually, so 2017 I was my first goal, like reading goal. I decided I was going to read 50 books in that year, and I got to 50 by like June, and I decided to go for 100. And now every subsequent year I've listened to 100 audiobooks. So that, I'm telling you what, like, I am not smarter than Adam Smith, like the great economist, but I can read his works, and then I end up standing on his shoulders and can make my new ideas off of the stuff that he already figured out. And then the more things I read, the more dots I can connect. And there's no new ideas. I think this is a Peter Schiff thing, or I don't remember. But the more, there's no new ideas. There's just a different way of connecting dots, right? So the more information you get in there, the more dots you have to choose from to be able to connect. So I think that's really huge. And I'll also say, we touched on surrounding yourself with like-minded people. That's part of the reason that I started Aspiring Women Achieving More, is because we were a book club, and we wanted to bring this inspiration and accountability and stuff to more and more women. And we're almost to 1900 now, roughly a year later. And that's been really fun, because I've done a lot of mindset work, so it's neat to bring other people into the pool. But you're given two hands, right? So one to pull people up, and then one to pull yourself up. So I actually just also joined GoBundance, if you've heard of that mastermind, the women's side of GoBundance. And I've got an accountability pod with women who are steps and steps and steps ahead of me. And it's just so neat to be having, this is what I think about what's going on in your life, conversations with people who are ahead of you in the life's journey or business journey. So, surrounding yourself with people you can lift up and who can lift you up is another big thing in terms of how I approach that.
Yeah, I love that. I really appreciate you sharing that, and so important. And you were mentioning in books and audiobooks a minute ago. I was thinking we had a guest on the show several episodes ago who very successful track records, done a lot of deals in the space, and he was mentioning he loves to read as well. And none of the books that he reads has anything to do with investing. It's
Right.
all personal development. It's all self development, things like that. And it just goes to show you again, just to hit that point home of just the importance of working on this between the ears. So
to that point too, success leaves clues. Like if you're talking to an incredibly successful guy and his path is to do personal development books instead of investing books, there's a clue.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And Mandy, I kind of want to go back to your point about goals and reviewing your goals and such. Talk to me about describe how you're defining your goals and how you're writing out, how are you tracking your goals? And I think the reason why I bring this up is that, everybody has their own variation of goal setting, right? And I think it's, I love Hal Elrod, and I heard him speak about this one day in a podcast last year about goal setting. And we innately have this, like we put a quantifiable goal out there, and then when we don't hit it, we think that we failed, right? But that may not always be the case. And so we got to change our mindset when we talk about goal setting. So tell us, how are you defining your goals and how are you tracking them?
Yeah. So I'll tell you, in the past, like that quantifiable goal, and I miss it. And then I'm like, oh, I can't trust myself. I would never say that, right? But it's always a little thing in the back of my head, because if I make a promise to you, Cody, I'm going to deliver. And I think a lot of people are like this. But if I make a promise to myself, like, you know what, I'm not going to eat cheesecake today. Who cares? It's been stressful, right? The chance that I'll break a promise to someone is greatest if it's to myself. And I think that's pretty broad, right? But, the chance to build up that, it's quite frankly, it's self-respect that I can count on myself to keep those promises is a huge thing. And I don't know if it was Hal or if it was David Osborne or whoever, but this idea of an old goal that I used to set. So I think it's very important the way you structure your goals so that you can know when you're getting there and you can celebrate them along the way. And there's, scholarly business theory to like, things should be smart. And if you Google what smart goals are, like, that's important, the way that you say the words of your goal. But one thing that I'm doing differently now that I didn't do before is an old goal would be work out 4 times a week. And then I make it, to February, and there's been 3 weeks that I worked out 3 times and not 4. And I'm like, I can't trust myself. I'm terrible. This is the, you know what I mean? So I just restructured how I wrote it. Instead of work out 4 times a week, that's roughly 200 times a year. So now I work out 200 times a year, and I have a little tally in a pretty notebook that, every day that I come into my office, I make tallies of each one of my goals. Like, did I work out? Did I take a yoga class? Was I fasted today? Did I have an adventure day with my kid? So I can tally those as I go along. And then the next week, when I kind of deeper evaluate them, I can change that number. So now I'm at 195 workouts I need to do to fulfill that goal for the rest of the year. You know what I mean? So it's setting myself up for success, for self-respect in terms of the words I use to set my goals, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so it does. And I think that kind of plays into the mindset thing, right? It's what you're feeding your mind, how you're feeding it, right? And the key words that you use are so important. It does make a difference. And I love the way that you rephrase the goals, and then you're constantly analyzing those goals. I think you mentioned earlier that you review your goals 50 times a year, right? And it's so powerful because how do you know how you're tracking if you're not paying attention, right? Or things happen, right? I mean, like, look at last year, COVID hit. Nobody expected that. So, and it can completely alter every aspect of your business. So you have to be able to pay attention, keep your finger on the pulse, and pivot where it's necessary. Like you said, hey, working out 5-6 times a week, you may get into it and realize it may not be realistic, but is, just kind of adjusting and pivoting as you go. And again, I love the way Hal Elrod said this before. You have to remember the journey as well. Remember where you started. Even if you don't hit the end goal, look at the growth that you've had in between. Look at the things you've been able to achieve in between, and celebrate that. It's okay to acknowledge that and appreciate that, right?
Mm-hmm. So one more note on that. So that's part of the reason that I was so drawn to GoBundance, is because one of the exercises that we do as a tribe is what we call a one sheet. And basically that's quantifying everything in your life, your net worth, your happiness, your health, your everything that you would need to make an incredible life. If you measure something, if you pay attention to some quantified figure, it's going to improve over time. So just paying attention and writing things down as a benchmark is huge. And that's what this tribe does. It's a big kind of core staple of what they do. And in terms of like seeing where you came from, I was on a call last night, and Pat Hyben was talking about, like, he looked at his one sheet from 10 years ago, and just to see that journey, from as compared where he is now versus 10 years ago. I mean, what a neat exercise to take a Polaroid every quarter of exactly how you're feeling emotionally, how you're feeling connected in your relationships, with your net worth, with your anything. I think it's a pretty cool concept.
Yeah, that is pretty neat. I saw you picking your camera up a minute ago. Were you taking a picture?
I did.
I love that. No, that is really neat. And something I've had to go look into that. That's pretty cool. So, well, Mandy, let's pivot a little bit. Before we get to a little bit more about your real estate portfolio, I kind of want to, talk a little bit more about the aspiring women achieving more. I think that's fantastic. I think we need more of that out there. And I kind of would love to get your perspective. Why do you think there's this disparity between, the real estate space in particular being a male dominated, a space? Why do you think we're seeing this disparity?
We talk about a lot about this in Aspiring Women, especially like with the leadership group that put it together. And because we all met being commercial real estate investors, and we kind of banded together because, when you're a minority group, it's nice to lift each other up. So I'll say that, you know, when you start adding zeros to projects, there's inherent risk, right? And just kind of as a gender, nature, nurture, whatever that is, you know, there's data that suggests that men are bigger risk takers than women. And, you know, I think that has a lot to do with it. Women really kind of crave, you know, I'm a mama bear, like protect my kiddo, you know? So like the taking on unnecessary risk is not an attractive prospect, you know? So I think that fear muscle, whatever. And I also kind of think like women who end up in high performance, and this, you know, if you're investing, putting these zeros on, like we talked about, you know, you're a high performer and you're interested in really becoming the best version of yourself you can be and like really doing big things and squeezing the juice out of life. So I think nature, nurture, whatever, to become a woman who's interested in those things, you probably were the perfect little student and you were the perfect little girl and you did everything the right way. And, you know, if you come from this aim to be perfect into this entrepreneurial space where the only way to win is to fail and to fail quickly and to learn from those mistakes and to pivot, that is a huge disparity. Like that brain gap, that jump you're going to have to make, that mindset jump you're going to have to make. I think it's an easier, I think men, because, you know, the you know, fear factor of many things is less, and it's a muscle, right? So if you've done something that is scary, then you're willing to, like, you realize you don't die at the end of it, right? And then the minute you don't, you know, the minute you realize you don't die, that it's not a real based fear like a lion attacking you 2000 years ago, whatever, you know, it becomes easier to take the next chance and the next chance. And you know, I think women, that fear stuff, because we're perfect little girls, it's a harder hurdle to jump.
Yeah. Well, you kind of alluded this a minute ago. I think women innately are better logical thinkers than men. I'm going to get some slack here, but you know, we like to think that we're smart, but we're not as smart as women, and especially a group of women together that, you know, inspiring one another. I mean, that's a scary force to be reckoned with. So I really respect that. But any of my fellow men out there that, you know, are married or in a committed relationship, you know that behind every good man there's a good woman, and you guys are just phenomenal, and it's always inspiring to see, you know, women like yourself that are out there empowering others, doing great things in the space and just breaking down those barriers. So kudos, great job. Love what you're doing. So tell us a little bit more about kind of where you see the group going. You know, what are some things that you're working on? How can other women get plugged into that network?
Sure, thank you. So our biggest presence is on Facebook. That's where we have 1,900-ish members. We are doing some group events. Like right now we have a Sober January challenge, which is, you know, we have a few dozen women that signed up for that. We're doing every single Friday. This is actually the very best value add, in my opinion. So whenever you're working on anything, you know, it's important to like verbalize your goals in the right way, but it's also then important to have accountability. So we are doing an accountability club that meets every single Friday at 1 p.m. Central. And, you know, basically we just kind of get on Zoom and it's over everybody's lunch hour. So we know that most people can be able to make it on an ongoing basis. And we show up and we say, all right, this is how I did last week. This is the next right step. We figure out that next right step, which I think is the most important thing, the key to figuring out any forward movement. So you figure out that next right step. And then if you need a resource, you need to think something through, or you need an introduction, you know, we as a group help you figure out what that is. And then, you know, next week you report back how you did. So that accountability group has been clutch for so many. So one woman wanted to start a business and she had, you know, she was a financial planner, but she hadn't ever owned her own business. So now she owns, like, she's branded a business and she's got speaking gigs. Like she paid speaking gigs within 2 months' time. Another woman wanted to work on her health. And in a month's time, because of this accountability stuff, she lost 17 pounds. You know, like it's any part of your life that you want to work on, we want to work on it with you. So find us mostly on Facebook. I'll make sure that you have those links. Or you can link through from my website, mandymcallister.com.
I love that. Love that. That's such a powerful group. And it just goes back to the importance of being around the right people, helping to push you and help you grow. So man, that's really, really cool. So, that's something that
Thank
we need to
you.
take a look at and mimic. So, but anyway, let's kind of pivot again. Let's kind of talk about your real estate portfolio a little bit. You've done a lot. In addition to all the stuff that we've already talked about, you're building a pretty substantial portfolio. Tell us a little bit about kind of where your portfolio is now, and what have you guys seen over the past couple of years since 2016, I think is your first
Yeah,
fourplex.
sure. I started doing everything on my own, I did a fourplex and then sixplex and then, just kind of started building a portfolio of, self-owned assets. And then I kind of dived into, syndication space. I bought into a passive deal and continued to buy some smaller stuff for my own accounts. And then actually just during COVID, end of September or so, we closed a joint venture. It's me and two other guys. We bought a 53 unit property in Kansas City, in Indianapolis. It's been a really neat progression. And I'll say this, I feel like in many, syndication or talking larger multifamily properties conversations, lots of people will say, oh, sell all your fourplexes and only buy 100 units plus, right? I think that there's benefits to both. So we alluded to this idea of we want to leave our W-2. And one thing I want to make sure that we talk about is, what does that look like? Because so many people have that as the goal. But like we talked about, if you can't quantify it, how the heck do you know that you got there? So that this was a thing that hit my brain. And I realized, oh, wait, I track my spending. Like I know exactly what I need to live my life. And if I had that plus some buffer, like I would feel comfortable. I'd have enough money coming in that I would be willing to leave my job, right? So what does that look like? But I couldn't find anything that kind of helped me estimate it. So I made a little calculator. So, once I hit that number, then I needed to hit, like I have it on my cork board up here so that I look at it every day. I realized that, I'm working because I want to work now. I'm in this job because it's fun and because I get to impact patients and work with my colleagues. And at any moment I want to be done with this job, I can be. And the level of freedom I feel knowing that is mind blowing. So, the reason I got there though is it's purely a cash flow based thing. And that cash flow comes from my solely owned 22 units primarily. That 130 and that 53, they're good and they bring in some solid cash flow, but the vast majority of my cash flow comes from my self-owned stuff. So, to have a security bucket of stuff that's dependable cash flow, I see no problem with it. I actually I think it's great news to have some smaller stuff for your accounts.
Yeah, I like that. And I think part of the barrier into this space, what we've seen over the past couple of years is kind of the idea or the attraction to syndication. And it feels like it's become mainstream, right? We say that all the time you have so many new investors coming into the space to pursue the syndication. And look, we favor that model. That's our approach. We love the economies of scale. We're trying to scale our businesses to get out of our W-2s and things like that. But the point being is there's a lot of emphasis and focus on syndication. Like you said, go bigger, go bigger, go bigger. But I think a lot of people are not realizing that you're right. There's a lot of opportunity in some of these smaller assets or even self-owned assets that, man, some of these little properties are cash cows. I mean, they could spit off some major cash flow. Now you have to have the right systems, you have to have the right, management and whatnot. But point being is that, if you lock yourself into this one box, especially a box like syndication where everybody's trying to do it, you could be missing out on a lot of opportunities. And that's something that internally we've kind of looked at as well, as like, hey, look, maybe we should consider JV in a smaller deal if it makes sense or whatnot. And I love this conversation too. A lot of people have this debate of, okay, well, do you want a small piece of a big pie or do you want a whole pie, or things like that. So I don't think it matters,
Yeah. I think end of the day, if your goal, step 800, is to leave your W-2, what do you need, right? You need cash coming in the door. Do you need cash flow or do you need doors, right? And I think we as kind of like a community tend to talk about like, oh, I have this many doors. How many doors do you have? Well, if that is the thing at the pinnacle of your decision-making process, the thing that matters the most, number of doors, you're going to do a way different deal than if it's cash flow. That's the thing that matters the most to you. And again, like to go back to GoBundance, the way that they kind of measure your passive income, your horizontal income or investments is, so if the numerator is how much your passive income is and your denominator is how much it costs you to live your life, right? What percentager are you? If you are 100 percentager or more, all of your bills are covered by passive income. That's a way more interesting measure to brag about than I have however many doors, to me at least.
Yeah. Oh, 100% agree. I mean, quality over quantity for sure. I mean, yeah, it's impressive to see all these big numbers. How I've got 4,000 doors, 5,000 doors. But I mean, look, it's just as impressive to me to have somebody that has a couple hundred doors and they've got that financial freedom. They're out there living the life that they want to live. I mean, and they got there, in a relatively shorter period of time. I think I completely agree with that. Don't get so caught up in the number of units more so than the quality. So, I had a point.
A lot of ways to skin a cat, and we in this world of syndication, because it is so sexy and there are lots of zeros, like I think we kind of get pigeonholed that this is the only way to go.
Yeah.
And, to be reminded that there's other ways is sometimes interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I kind of want to go back and kind of touch on the fact that, I love how you have this calculator. You've really tracked, hey, what is the cash flow I need to put myself in a good position here? You've done several deals now, but it doesn't take, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it doesn't take a lot, as much as I think people think, to get there. Now, in the medical device sales, for many people that may not know that industry, typically a higher paying job, right? I mean, maybe make a pretty good salary, get good living off that. And to be able to be in a position where you've created enough cash flow now that you could replace that income in a shorter period of time. My point being is it doesn't take as much as people think, I guess, to get there, but you have to track it and you have to monitor it.
It's like real life cash flow game. Like if you've played Robert Kiyosaki's like cash flow game, I reunited with some of my college teammates, and like now we have like cash flow game night. Because that's the end of the day, that's all it is. It's playing offense and to get more cash flow, and it's playing defense to make sure that you've got your spending under control. And I was talking to somebody who, like, a guy in California, he's got a ton of resources, he's got a ton of cash, and he's talking about, I need to syndicate. And I'm thinking, like, if you have your own capital, why? Isn't it kind of a competitive advantage if you have your own money? I get it, like using other people's money is like, my background's economics, I get it, OPM, right? But it's kind of a competitive advantage if you have a little bit of money of your own. So, to be able to redirect, money that you earn one time from exchanging dollars or hours for dollars into something that's going to pay you forever, like a cash flow in a rent check that's coming in every month. Like if you can redirect one-time money into a forever money, that's what's life changing. That's the flow of money coming in, so you can choose to leave your job or not.
Yeah, it's a pretty compelling point there. Yeah, you're absolutely right. So, all right, Mandy. Well, listen, tell us what's on the horizon for you and your team.
Yeah. So my joint venture group is looking to continue to grow our footprint in Indianapolis. So we're actively acquiring there. We're underwriting deals all the time, but you got to kiss a lot of frogs. We're considering expanding into one additional market this year because, I feel like I know Indianapolis in an intimate enough way that we could pivot and bring on another market in order to grow the portfolio. I'm, looking to grow Aspiring Women Achieving More. We're looking to do some master classes in terms of teaching and, really bringing that accountability stuff that we've seen be so powerful to more women. And, hoping to go on a bunch of adventure days with my kiddo. That's what's on the docket for the year.
I love it. That's awesome, man. Hopefully it's going to be a great 2021 for you. And it sounds like, man, you've got so many great things going on. Just love what you're doing. So really, really excited to stay connected with you and continue to see your growth. So, but Mandy, unfortunately, we're kind of getting near the end of our time here. But before we go, I have 4 more questions for you, and then we'll kind of wrap up. So we kind of discussed this earlier in the show. You alluded to, you love to read, but tell us what are some other things that you like to do for your continued education to further your investing?
Yeah, I love full immersion events. I love going away to seminars and meeting people and being around people for a few days that are doing what I'm doing. Those don't really happen during COVID, but that's like my vacation of choice, really.
Nice. I love that. And I think, in speaking of that, I know that's Tony Robbins. I've never been to one of his events, but I've just seen and watched and I mean, they're fully immersed. It's
15-hour days. It's the best.
Yeah. I definitely, it's on my bucket list to try to get to one of those sooner than later, but I recommend that. So, but cool. Well, what has been some of the lasting lessons that you've learned throughout your journey?
So the biggest one is, the fear muscle that we talked about earlier, that I think keeps a lot of, especially women, from making moves in this business. The way that I've gotten around it, it's like I read some Stoic philosophy books, and end of the day, like all taking a risk is whatever that downside is. You're not risking that you're going to die. You're risking whatever that downside is, right? So if you can figure out what the worst case scenario is and get comfortable with that, then you should really be moving forward. Like if the worst case scenario is you could lose $10,000 on this, I mean, if you're going to be able to still live your life, like what is the thing that's going to disappoint you more in 10 years? That you lost $10,000 or that you didn't take a chance? So if you can project yourself in the future and, like, hindsight's 2020, give yourself like hindsight with whatever that worst case scenario is, like that might mitigate some fear.
Love that. Yeah, that's such a powerful statement. I love that. Thank you. And that kind of segues into my next question is, what advice would you give to listeners to help them grow their businesses?
You got to get started. Until you're in it, you're not really doing the real learning. It's like playing double dutch. You can watch the jump ropes and you can be figuring out exactly when you need to go, or you can just go try. And I mean, I'm a huge proponent of walking before you run. So that fourplex was like $120,000. Like, you can find assets that make sense in markets that are not that far from you. Because living in Chicago, I just looked at 2.5 hours outside of where I'm investing. So if what's stopping you is a dollar value that is too scary, you can figure that out. So figure out what it's going to take to get comfortable with the downside to move forward.
Awesome. Great advice. Really appreciate that, Mandy. So, all right, Mandy, tell listeners how they can learn more about you and get connected with you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. The best way to kind of catch all for, the aspiring women, my good fortune capital, all of the stuff that I'm working on, is mandymcallister.com. Would love to connect with everybody there.
Awesome. Well, Mandy, really appreciate you tuning in with us today. Fun conversation. Really enjoy everything that, that you presented to us today. Love what you're doing in your business. So keep on and look forward to staying connected.
Thanks, Cody. This was great.